understanding and working with the basic of what is Angular and what is the concept of single page applications. One overview I given you. So before going into the concept of Angular detailedly, so first we need to start with the language. So the language is actually required for Angular is TypeScript. So today we are going to start working with TypeScript. So once we are aware of basic TypeScript, then we can start learning and working with Angular. Angular requires this TypeScript. So what is TypeScript and what are the features and why we need this TypeScript? I will give you a just glance overview of that. How we can set up environment and work with that. Generally, it is easy to understand and work with TypeScript if you are already aware of JavaScript. It will be very easy. But anyhow, I will give you a simple overview of what is this TypeScript is. Actually, I will give a small history of the evolution, why Angular have to choose this. Before Angular, we learned that Google community have developed, Google developed AngularJS. And AngularJS was using technically JavaScript. That means before Angular, so we have AngularJS. And AngularJS is using JavaScript. AngularJS is using JavaScript. So what is
Recording in progress.
So it is valid. It is valid. So that means JavaScript transforms is not strongly typed. So one of the main problem with JavaScript is it's not strongly typed, right? So another point is JavaScript will not support all features of OOPS, object-oriented programming. So technically, it is not an OOP language, but supports certain features of OOP. It's not a OOP language, but it supports certain features of OOPs. Not everything. That means actually you don't have any contracts. That means no interfaces, no interfaces, no abstract classes, abstract classes. So no code security, no code security, code security. That means abstractions and all this. So we don't have that. That means it is not an OOP language, but supports only some features of OOPs. You might have learned that point in JavaScript. So it doesn't have all the abilities of OOP. It supports like inheritance, it supports classes. JavaScript supports some of the features of object-oriented programming, but it is not an OOP language. So if it is not OOP language, extensibility, reusability, security issues will be there. So JavaScript is not completely an OOP language. Okay. Now, these are some of the major issues that are not satisfying with JavaScript, and a lot of compatibility related issues also. So these are not satisfying for developer to build large scale applications. So that is one problem with JavaScript. But JavaScript is the only language which is understandable to browser. Browser can understand the client side language, that is JavaScript. So with HTML and all, it can understand JavaScript. Browsers can understand JavaScript, but JavaScript is not having all the abilities. So Google Angular team uh, started a new language called Typescript. They started a language called Typescript. They started a new language called Typescript for Angular. They started a new language called Typescript for Angular. So that means you use Typescript and it will be translated into JavaScript. So when Google Angular team decided to develop a new version for Angular to overcome the problems in AngularJS, they also decided that they will not go with JavaScript now because JavaScript having a lot of issues. Then they decided of using this Typescript. They decided of using this Typescript. So the Google Angular team thought of designing this, and they started actually Typescript. But happened is they started this Typescript, but what happened is Microsoft already have a language called Typescript. Microsoft already have a language called Typescript. So Anders Hazelberg, he introduced Anders Hazelberg introduced Typescript language. He introduced a Typescript language for Microsoft actually. So already Microsoft is using this language. Anders Hazelberg is one of the architect of Microsoft. He is responsible for the languages called C# and all in .NET. And they developed a language called Typescript. And they are already using this Typescript. So TypeScript is already there. TypeScript is already there with Microsoft, and they are using it. Now suddenly they saw that Google is also trying a language similar to that. That means Google Typescript, they were trying same like TypeScript, but Microsoft already have it. So then Microsoft asked Google team, like, so why you are trying again a new language? We already have this. Take a look about this. Then Microsoft and Google Angular team, these two people sat together and had a discussion and had an overview of complete TypeScript. And Google was very much satisfied with that, because that is what they were trying to develop again, which is already there, which is completely built. And the same thing Google was trying again. That's the reason Google thought that, okay, we will not waste time in this script anymore. So let's adopt this TypeScript. So that means use the language TypeScript. And they asked Microsoft to make it as open source so that they can use in Angular. So you are now learning Angular technology built by Google, and the language for Angular is built by Microsoft. So that means now you are dealing with, so Google and Microsoft collaborated community related one technology. Angular belongs to Google and TypeScript belongs to Microsoft. So the point is, TypeScript is more better than JavaScript. So how? I will tell you what are those points. We will discuss about that. Technically, what is the concept of TypeScript? What are the features of TypeScript and how do we use the TypeScript? So we will see that. That means why TypeScript? What are the features of TypeScript? And TypeScript is not only for Angular. All the latest technologies, so client-side environments, they are working with, technically they are working with TypeScript, even React-like also. React-like also, they are working with TypeScript. So what is TypeScript and what are the features of TypeScript? We will see that. So we need to understand the basic features of TypeScript over JavaScript. What are the key features of TypeScript over JavaScript? So one of the main feature is actually TypeScript is, technically you can say that it is a strict mode of or you can say strictly typed JavaScript. It is strictly typed JavaScript. It is strictly typed superset of JavaScript. So technically, what does that means? I will tell you. Superset of JavaScript. Superset of JavaScript. It is strictly typed superset of JavaScript. It is strongly typed. Strongly typed. What is strictly typed? What is strongly typed? I hope everybody who knows JavaScript have an idea, actually. So I hope everyone knows. So what is JavaScript? JavaScript strict mode. You know this, huh? What is strict mode of JavaScript? What is strict mode of JavaScript? You know this? You have an idea what is strict mode of JavaScript? You know the strict mode of JavaScript, everyone, right? No? Because that is what generally you have to know basically in JavaScript. Basically in JavaScript, you need to understand that actually. So I will just give you an overview here. So I will just give an overview, because when you learn JavaScript, so here, see, suppose I am writing a script and we are writing a function. And you might have learned this in JavaScript. See, x equal to 10 and document dot write. I am writing x is equal to plus x. Now, generally, so x is a variable and we are not declaring the variable. Without declaring the variable, directly we assigned a value into that variable and we are trying to use it. What do you say? Is it valid? Is it valid? So, good. So, it is valid in JavaScript. It is valid in JavaScript, and you can see that. So it is working fine. That means it is valid in JavaScript and it is working fine. So we will call that function F1 here. Yeah. And you can see it is working fine. X equal to 10 working fine. There is no problem. But this leads to a lot of inconsistency in coding. That means one developer declares a variable, another person will not declare a variable. In a same project, lot of inconsistency in coding will come. To avoid that, we will ask our developers to write JavaScript in strict mode. To turn on the strict mode, we have to use strict. This is what you have to write at the top of your functions. This indicates that it is in strict mode. Strict mode indicates that developers cannot violate the programming standards and they have to follow the standards of programming so that it will reduce the inconsistency in coding. So you have to turn on the strict mode. And the JavaScript strict mode is turned on by writing this line at the top. Use strict. That means it will turn on the strict mode of JavaScript. So once strict mode is on, you can observe that now you have problem here. You can inspect and you can go to the console. You can see it says X is not defined. But if it is not in strict mode, you don't need to define X. It can directly work. But if it is in strict mode, it will not work. It says X is not defined. Now you have to declare the variable. So like var X, then the variable is declared, then you can use it. So that is strict mode of JavaScript. And by default, JavaScript is not in strict mode. You have to explicitly turn on the strict mode. So TypeScript, so it is a strictly typed superscript of JavaScript. That means, so you can simply say that TypeScript is by default in strict mode. I hope everyone understood the point. Is it clear what is meant by strict mode? Right? That means TypeScript is by default in strict mode. That means you have to follow all the standards in a correct way. You cannot just define so by violating the program standards. So TypeScript is by default strict mode. JavaScript is not by default strict mode. We need to turn it on. And it is strongly typed. Strongly typed means you can define the data type. So that means JavaScript, it is a number, X is number. But after that, you can assign a string. After that, you can assign a Boolean. It will transform the type. But not in TypeScript. In TypeScript, we can restrict the type. When you restrict the type, so technically, the type is going to avoid all other contradictory values. That means any contradictory, the value which is not the type we are expecting, any value sent, it will not work. So technically, JavaScript is not strongly typed and TypeScript is strongly typed. How it can define the data types, we will see. Practically, we will see that. First, we are discussing the basic features. Another point is TypeScript. TypeScript supports. TypeScript is an OOP language. That means it supports all features of OOP, object-oriented programming. JavaScript is not an OOP language. It supports only certain features of OOPs, but it is not a complete OOP language. So TypeScript is a complete OOP language. It supports all the features of OOPs. So that is one important point you need to understand. And generally, all the JavaScript features will work here, but it is more better than JavaScript. So that is complete. You can use all features like abstract classes, so data abstraction, data hiding, so access modifiers, so like private, protected, public. So it supports all the features of OOPS. So complete object-oriented programming. And it supports several options like additional features like generics. So it supports like namespaces. It supports like tuples. What is that? I will explain. It will support asynchronous, async, and await. These we will discuss detailedly in the concepts of working with Angular also, right? So technically, that's what the point. So you need to understand the features. That means that is the features of TypeScript when compared to JavaScript. And remember one point. Technically, TypeScript is not just only for Angular. Don't think that TypeScript is used for Angular. TypeScript is a very huge language. Actually, TypeScript is built with TypeScript. TypeScript is completely designed with TypeScript only. That means it supports low-level features also. Low-level features. It supports low-level features that can interact with hardware services. That means, so TypeScript is used for building very large scale applications also individually. TypeScript with Angular have a certain role, but don't think that TypeScript is for Angular. So Angular is using TypeScript, and TypeScript is not just only for Angular. It is used to build very large scale applications also. So the large scale applications which can run server side also. It's not like just client side or anywhere. Even it can handle direct interactions with hardware services, like it can turn on the camera, it can turn off the camera, it can handle the keyboard, it can handle the mouse, it can handle the pointing devices. TypeScript is a very huge language. So don't ever consider TypeScript as a language for Angular, right? It's a very huge language. Angular is using some of it to handle its interactions. So TypeScript individually is a very big language. Entire TypeScript is built with TypeScript only. That is the ability of TypeScript. That means generally to interact with hardware services, so you need other support of low-level languages. That means like Java, C#, or other languages need support of a low-level language to interact with hardware services. They are built with other languages, but TypeScript is completely built with TypeScript only. It can directly interact with operating systems. So that is what the ability of TypeScript. So that is the feature of TypeScript. So TypeScript is more than what it is used in Angular. So individually, it has a lot of abilities. So we are using this with Angular, but individually it is having a lot of abilities. You will understand generic namespace and all this when you are working with it. So you are going to explore some of those features and work with them. That is generally TypeScript, how we can work and how we can deal with the TypeScript. Now, actually, after knowing the basic difference, but one problem is very important. Remember, you should know that browser cannot understand TypeScript. Browser cannot understand TypeScript. So the TypeScript programs are compiled into JavaScript. That means finally browser is using JavaScript. So technically, so we need to know that. So I already told you these other topics you will learn when we are discussing the concepts. So don't get struck there. Come out of that. So several people struck at that place only. What is tuple, sir? I told you that we are going to discuss about them. So don't get struck there. Okay. Follow me, right? Then you can understand. So the point is, directly TypeScript is not understandable to browsers. So this TypeScript, whatever programs you write, they are translated. They are translated into JavaScript. So finally, they need to be compiled into JavaScript only. Finally, your projects will be using JavaScript, but developers will not be writing directly JavaScript. They will be writing in TypeScript that will be translated into JavaScript and given to the browser. What is advantage of doing so? Browsers have the complete ability of using their program features, means TypeScript program features, and build application faster with a more secured way. Finally, it is completely translated into JavaScript and given to that, which you will see how it works. Now, how TypeScript is going to work practically, we need to understand that. For that, you need to know one more point, that is the basic TypeScript architecture. The basic TypeScript architecture, that means how TypeScript actually works, the basic TypeScript architecture. So let's see what actually TypeScript contains and how TypeScript works, the architecture of TypeScript. So I will give you a simple overview, the diagram of the TypeScript architecture. So let's see the TypeScript architecture diagram. Right. So the TypeScript architecture diagram. Yeah, this is the basic TypeScript architecture. That means TypeScript comprises of this. So what are these? I will just give you a simple glance on that so that you can understand. As I already told you, TypeScript is completely built with TypeScript only. That means TypeScript programs will have the extension .ts, TS TypeScript, and the TypeScript comprises of all these. So what are these? So actually, in the TypeScript, you can observe here in the TypeScript, you can see at the bottom, you can see there is a core compiler. So you can see there is a core compiler at the bottom. So at the bottom, you can see there is a core compiler. So let's see actually. So you see, this is the TypeScript core compiler. This is the TypeScript core compiler. The responsibility of the core compiler is what this core compiler will do is it is going to verify the syntaxes of the program you have written, process the keywords, and if there is any problem in syntaxes, code blocks, keywords, then it will fire up the errors and it will display the errors. The responsibility of core compiler is to check the structure of the program you have written, to check the syntaxes you have written, to check the blocks you have written, to check the keywords you have written, to check the conversion types that you have configured. If there is any problem in that, it is going to report the errors. That means your program will not successfully compile. So TypeScript has a core compiler, which is responsible for verifying the syntaxes, verifying the blocks, and verifying the keywords, and checking all the problems in your code. Actually, internally, they are managed by these files like core TS, program TS, scanner TS, parser TS, checker TS, emitter TS. A simple point I will tell you, like core TS will verify the basic structure. Program TS will verify the code blocks. Code blocks means if block, for block, so function blocks, class blocks, like that. Scanner responsible for input activities. Parser responsible for converting the types and checking the converting the data types. Checker is responsible for checking the data types. Emitter is responsible for output activities. So that means you usually have a core compiler, and this core compiler is responsible for handling all this. So it is responsible for handling all this. So it is responsible for compiling your program and verifying the errors and the problems and report them, right? That is what actually the role of core compiler. So that is the first point. Written the program in TypeScript. That program is not understandable to browser. That TypeScript program need to be translated into JavaScript. The TypeScript program need to be translated into JavaScript after successfully compiling. That transcompiling is done by this standalone TS compiler. So you have two compilers. So the core compiler and the transcompiler. Standalone TS compiler, it is actually transcompiler. What this compiler will do, after program successfully compiled, then it will translate that into JavaScript. It is responsible for reading every line of your TypeScript and convert that line into JavaScript and create a JavaScript program for your TypeScript. That means it is responsible for transcompiling into JavaScript. Transcompiling into JavaScript. So two compilers are present. The core compiler checking the problems. Once it is successful, then transcompiler comes to the picture, and transcompiler is responsible for translating into JavaScript. So these two are important in the compilers. So core compiler and transcompiler. Is everyone clear with this? Understood these two? Is it clear? The core compiler and the transcompiler. Right. Good. So you understood the difference between them. What is a core compiler and what is a transcompiler? Good. Next point is technically, once we have compiled, once we are learning about the compilation and all these options, how that option is. So what is the point is, we have language service. Now compiler is going to verify the syntax, is going to verify the syntax, is going to verify the blocks, verify the keywords and all. Generally, in general computing technologies, general computing technologies. So the point is, you might have heard about the word service. Can you tell what is a service is? In computing technologies, what is a service? So what do you say? What is a service? So what do you think a service is? Good, good. So generally, the role of service in computing technologies is to provide, technically, can I say that service contains business logic? Business logic. What do you say? Can we say that service contains all the business logic? Yeah. Right. That means that is what actual key main concept is. So others, whatever you said is okay. But the main concept is, whatever your compiler needs to verify, all that information is provided by this language service. That means TypeScript language service contains the information about the language. That means the keywords, the rules, the code blocks, the syntaxes, everything is provided by this language service only. It is responsible for providing all the service. And the compiler is going to verify your code by comparing that in the service. That means from the service, it will get information and it will check as per it is defined in the service. That means whatever a compiler needs to compile your code, that is defined by service. Service contains all the repository that you need for your TypeScript. TypeScript related all the rules, references, TypeScript related all the keywords, syntaxes, blocks, everything are configured in a language service. Everything is configured in a language service. So a language service provides the information about the language, which is used by compiler to compile the programs that you have written. So that means compiler gets the information about the keywords, the syntaxes, and everything from a language service. So it provides that information. So it contains all the TypeScript related repository. Everything is present inside this language service. So which is taken by core compiler, it will compile successfully. After core compiler successfully compiled, then it is to be translated into JavaScript. That is taken care by this standalone compiler. So standalone compiler is a transcompiler which converts into JavaScript. So the point here is when standalone compiler is compiling into JavaScript, I will show you practically, you will understand. If there are some errors in your code, then standalone compiler can still able to convert into JavaScript if JavaScript can understand them. That means some problems are there in your TypeScript code, but for JavaScript it doesn't matter. Then standalone compiler will not consider those errors. It will forcibly generate the JavaScript file and it will convert everything into JavaScript. That means if it knows that JavaScript can understand, then it will compile them. That is the reason developer should not always depend on this transcompiler. So first developer have to depend on this core compiler. Why to use transcompiler? Transcompiler only to translate into JavaScript. But errors, so we have to verify through the core compiler only. Errors we have to verify through the core compiler. We have to check by using the core compiler. And whatever the core compiler returns as errors, we have to make sure that we corrected them. So after that, we send to transcompiler. Transcompiler will translate into JavaScript. If you send some errors code to transcompiler, transcompiler is able to convert it into JavaScript, even if it is having errors. Then that doesn't satisfy. So as a developer, because several issues will come when it goes to the presentation. So that means we are expecting one and it is returning something else. To avoid that, we have to make sure that, there are no errors in the core compiler itself. Check everything. Don't depend on standalone compiler. Standalone compiler responsibility is to just to convert to JavaScript, not to check the errors. Errors are checked by the TypeScript compiler. I hope everyone understood these three. Are these three clear? So these 3 points are clear, right? Core compiler, standalone compiler, and the language service. Good. So the language service transcompiler, core compiler. Now, what is this TS server? You see, we have a server. So we have server. So now tell me, what is the role of server? What is the role of server in computing technology? What is in computing technology, what is the role of server? Server. What is the role of server? Okay. Request, response, package management, receiving data. Good, good. Right. Okay. Okay. So now all your, yeah, good, right? All your answers looks good, but not accurate. They looks good, but not accurate. So they will not satisfy generally the interviewers. So such kind of answers immediately. But they are correct. Your answers are correct, but they will not satisfy the interviewers so correctly. Why? Because actually you have to hit the keywords. The keywords are nothing but generally what is the point about server is. I hope majority of you people, server means its responsibility is hosting. What I say, right? Hosting. And not only hosting, so its responsibility is, so server means technically one of first point so comes to the mind for a developer is hosting. Server is responsible for hosting. It is responsible for processing. So processing is nothing but your request and response, and it is responsible for deploying. Deploying means ready to publish. What do you say? Can I say this? Does my answer looks good about server? Right? That means the main responsibility is hosting, right? Servers, hosting, processing, so deploying. This is the role of a server actually. And now TS server is a TypeScript server. That means what happens is, this is the location where all your TypeScript programs are loaded. TypeScript programs are loaded. TypeScript programs are compiled. TypeScript programs are processed, transcompiled. That means all these activities happen in TS server. Understood? That means compiling your programs, loading your programs, translating the programs, everything is managed inside TS server. Understood? That is what actually TypeScript server is. So the responsibility of server is to host the programs, compile the programs, process the programs, generate the output and render them. So handling the request and response. So technically, so that is the concept of role of server. That means where the TypeScript programs are loaded. What do you say? Where the TypeScript programs are loaded? Where the TypeScript programs are loaded? Good. TS server. And where they are compiled? Where they are compiled in TS server. That means server is responsible for hosting, configuring, and deploying and everything. So all your TypeScript programs will work here. Compiling, processing, everything happens in TS server. That is TypeScript server. Okay. Next, important. So you have a shim. We have a shim. Actually, we call shimmer. VS is actually Visual Studio. That belongs to Microsoft. We call it as Visual Studio Shim. So generally we call shimmers, right? I hope you might have learned about this shimmers in your Java. In your Java, in your programming languages. You heard about shimmer? Have you learned shim? No, not heard about that. Okay, fine. But remember one point, actually, so it's okay, but that is so much in depth about the point to understand actually. So is your Java cross-platform? Is it understandable to every operating system services? Is it cross-platform? Oh, good. Right? So, right. Good. Okay. Right. Far right. Good. So that means technically, so it is platform independent. Do you know who makes your Java programs platform independent? Who makes your Java programs platform independent? Very good. JVM. In JVM, who makes them independent? Is JVM only one, or it contains several things? Is JVM one, or it contains so many things? So it contains several things. Good, good. Too many. So many things are present inside JVM. So means it contains interpreter, linkers, loaders, parsers. All these are present. Am I right? Right? Right. And in that, there will be a shimmer which is responsible for making your program translate program compatible to every operating system. This means shimmer makes your programs OS neutral. Understood? They will make your programs OS neutral. That means any technology in the world which says that I am cross-platform, that is because of this shimmer only. That is very in-depth about compiler. So that's the reason you might not heard about it, because usually trainers will not go that much in-depth to tell about what is inside compiler. For your level, that is too much. So, but architects of software programming have to know everything inside compiler, what will be, how compiler will compile, inside compiler, what components will be there. They understand every point. In that case, you will hear about this shimmer. So shimmer is responsible for doing that. Actually, the word shim is very popular actually. So the general concept of shim, right? So it is very popular in the shim concept actually. It is available even in Android like projects. You will see shimmers will be very regular. Actually, the point is, means just overview I will tell you. So overview we will discuss about that, right? The concept is nothing but generally. I hope you have seen why that word comes shimmer. I will tell you here. So let's go Google and images. I hope you have seen shrimp. You have seen these shrimps, right? You have seen the shrimp, prawns and shrimps, right? Yes. Do you know difference between them? Shrimp and prawns. Do you know difference between them? No? Yeah. Don't know. Actually, shrimp is gender neutral. Shrimp is gender neutral. It is gender neutral. So that means they are gender neutral. Understood? They are gender neutral. That means the word shrimp indicates that they are neutral. They are not male or female. So they are gender neutral. Shrimps are gender neutral. That is the point actually. And the shim, so the actually concept that came shrimp, that means this shrimp is going to make your programs OS neutral. That means now if anyone asks, is TypeScript understandable to every operating system? So is cross-platform, is TypeScript cross-platform? Yes. So how you say that who is responsible for making the TypeScript programs run on every operating system? Who is responsible for making it understandable to every operating system? So that is done by shims. VS is actually Visual Studio, that is Microsoft. So shim.ts, this is responsible for taking your TypeScript code and it is going to convert that into, it is responsible for converting into the code which is understandable to every operating system service. That is what actually shim is. So, and every operating system, every environment, so which is platform neutral, they have this concept, they have this mechanism. So that's not a new concept actually. Architecturally, it is very much familiar to all the developers. So Shimmer is responsible for making platform neutral. Okay, so we have server, we have Shimmer, so and everything. Now one more point is there is another language service. This is managed language service, and we have language service. Two options are there. What is managed language? And this is generally, for that you need to understand. So right, actually we have a concept of, suppose your source code. Now suppose this source code is compiled. This source code is compiled on a specific operating system, OS, like, so that means Windows, or it is compiled on so Mac, so or it is compiled on some Linux. So that means now what happens is when this source code is compiled, on any specific operating system, then what happens is this source code, the compiled code, it generates a unmanaged code. It generates an unmanaged code. The problem with unmanaged code is this unmanaged code, that means the compiled code generates an unmanaged code. This unmanaged code, so is if you compiled on Windows, it works for only Windows. You compiled for Mac, it will work for only Mac. You compiled on Linux, it will work for only Linux. That means this unmanaged code is the code which is understandable to specific operating system. And the unmanaged code of Linux is not understandable to Mac. It is not understandable to Windows. So they are only for that particular operating system, native to that operating system. So to overcome this, so the compiled code is generated into, by using the Shimmer, it is generated into managed code. And the managed code advantage is it is understandable to every operating system. That means one code that can reach any device. Understood? One code which can reach every device. That means the TypeScript code is converted into one code which can reach every device, every operating system. Anywhere it will work. There will not be separate programs. There will not be separate extensions. Only one program run on every operating system. So that is managed. That means now we have two options here. Language service is not understandable to every operating system, cross-platform. So it is not cross-platform. Understood? It is not cross-platform. Then how the TypeScript becomes cross-platform? With the help of Shimmer, it generates a managed code. This managed code can work on any operating system. Understood? That means with the help of Shimmer, it is going to convert into managed code, and managed code is understandable to every operating system. So every operating system can understand and use that managed code. So we have two, language service and managed language service. Managed language service contains the TypeScript understandable to every operating system. Language service contains the TypeScript which is understandable to only to that specific operating system. That's what actually this. And editors is nothing but editors are used for compiling, processing, and generating the TypeScript programs. Generating the TypeScript programs and running the TypeScript programs. For a developer, they provide an IDE, an integrated development environment. And I hope you know various types of editors. Editors are used for writing the TypeScript programs, compiling the TypeScript programs, editing the TypeScript programs, and using TypeScript programs in our application development. And you know, so a lot of editors are present. This is the official website of editors, editor config. You can go to this editor config and you see these are all editors. So you can use all these editors. So that means you can use, so your Eclipse, you can use your Sublime, or you can use your WebStorm. These are all editors. These are all editors. So many are there. So many are there. These are all various types of editors. You can use any of them. You can use any of them. These are all different types of editors. So many are there. So many editors will be there. I just given you a basic overview. The point is these editors are used for writing, compiling, processing, and using the TypeScript programs. And the editor that we are going to use is this Visual Studio Code. We will use this Visual Studio Code. So for our Angular, for building Angular applications, and for TypeScript, we use Visual Studio Code because it is free, it is open source, it is cross-platform, it runs on every operating system, and it is built by the people who built TypeScript. So nobody can provide a better help other than Visual Studio for TypeScript, because it is from the people who built TypeScript. That's the reason. So 100% this is the best editor for working with the TypeScript and working with Angular based. Anything TypeScript based means you can go with this Visual Studio Code. It has a lot of abilities, but we will use this for our Angular applications. So Visual Studio Code is the editor, so which we use for our TypeScript and Angular. So first point. So I hope everyone is clear with this complete architecture. So everyone clear, understood the complete architecture, right? This is the basic architecture. This is the basic architecture of TypeScript, right? So once you are aware of this TypeScript, yeah, the notes and everything related to this will be provided to you. Our admin will send you a classroom link, and you can log in into that classroom link, Google Classroom link, and there you will find the notes for our sessions. Okay, our admin will send all registered people. So I told you already, after 1-2 sessions, so we will change the link for only the people who are completed the dead dues, and for our admin will take care about sharing the notes and everything for you. Okay, right? And so the point is, the entire notes and everything I will give you, right? So these all topics related information will be shared with you. Up to this, I hope everyone is clear, understanding about working with this now, right? Next important, after knowing this, so technically, next step, we have to know about how we can install, set up the environment and work with TypeScript. Let's see how we can set up the environment working with the TypeScript, how we can do that. So you saw the basic architecture of TypeScript and various options in the TypeScript. Now the next point is how we can set up and install TypeScript. Let's see how we can set up and install TypeScript. For that, first what you have to do is to set up the environment and start practically working with TypeScript. You have to download and install Node.js on your PC. Already you have installed, already you learned HTML, CSS, all these. You are working on Visual Studio Code editor. Which editor you are using? So which editor you are using? Visual Studio Code. Okay, so no problem. So no problem. Now you follow what I show here. That is enough. Okay. So first you download and install Node.js on your PC. Why? Because we are going to use a package manager called npm. npm is actually Node package manager. So package manager is used to download and install various libraries required for project. So there are so many package managers like Yarn, so like ruby gems, and we have like Grunt, we have like Bower, so like NuGet, like npm. So we are going to use this npm as a package manager. So many package managers are present. So these are all the package managers. And npm is a package manager that comes with Node.js. So what you have to do is, so visit the official website of Node.js, nodejs.org, nodejs.org. That is the official website of Node.js. So, and here, what we have to do is, so in this, you download this 14 version, not the 16 version. You go with this 14 version. 16 version is just an add-on for existing features. So that will create a lot of issues for you at this level. Later you can individually, if you are dealing with Node.js, you can try that. Initially, you just download this 14 version. And if you belong to other operating systems, you click other downloads. You see in other downloads, you will find the installation for all other operating systems. Don't download the zip files. Download this MSI package files. So those MSI package files are responsible for opening a setup. You just follow the steps, next. That's it. You don't need to worry about any setting, any option extra. You just follow simply next, and you finish your Node.js installation. So only 3-4 steps will be there. It will finish your installation of Node.js. Once Node.js is successfully installed, you have to check whether it is working or not. You open your command prompt. In the command prompt, you have to just run the command node-v. Node-v will check the version of Node.js. It will get the version of Node.js. And it shows this is the version that is available now. And you have to use npm-v. That is the package manager version. And if you are already having Node.js in your computer, and if the version is below 10, then please reinstall that, update to the new version. Just install the new version, it will get updated, right? So make sure that your Node.js is 10 and above, not 10, above 10. Because some old computers, some old projects, people are still working on Node.js older versions. Our latest Angular related features cannot work on old version of Node.js. You have to have the new version of Node.js. So that is 10 above any version is okay. You better use this 14. That is the long-term supported version currently. You can download that and you can install. And once you check the version node-v, so Node.js is working. can
Recording
do is
in
you can
progress.
follow this GitHub URL where the notes is available. I will share with all of you people. So this is the GitHub URL. Means until our admin shares our official classroom link, so you can get the introduction related and TypeScript related everything notes, whatever I am discussing in the class in this location, you can go through that. Okay, na? So in this location, the steps, the introduction, so those options are available there. You can go through them, right? So, but once officially our admin shares you the link of our classroom, there you will get our classroom related daily notes updated. But this installation process, introduction to Angular, so features of TypeScript, all these are available. All these are architecture and everything are available in this link. You can go through that. Okay, right? So you see, after downloading and configuring, what you have to do is you have to install TypeScript. After Node.js successfully installed, you have to install TypeScript. npm install -g TypeScript. That means it is the global. So we have to see the global. So it will do that global. Okay. Now, once it is done, so that means once you hit enter, it will download and install the latest version of TypeScript for you. And we can use this TypeScript so individually first, then we can integrate and work with Angular. And the TypeScript latest version is TypeScript 4.3.4. So that is the latest version of TypeScript, and you will get that TypeScript latest version installed on your machine. So you can also test TSC-V that gets the TypeScript version. TSC is your TypeScript compiler. Actually, TSC will use the core compiler and transcompiler together. So TSC command is required for compiling. So it is required for compiling. Transcompiler and core compiler, it is required for compiling. So now once TypeScript is installed and TypeScript is successfully configured, that means you have to run this command npm install -g TypeScript. That will install TypeScript. Once it is installed, you can check the version TSC-V. It will get the TypeScript version available on your PC. Once TypeScript is there, you download and install Visual Studio Code Editor. You download and install Visual Studio Code Editor. So because we are going to learn all our JavaScript and everything inside this editor, so you have to download and install Visual Studio Code Editor. So this is Visual Studio Code Editor. You can just Google Visual Studio Code. And this is Visual Studio Code Editor official site. And you can download for your operating system, whatever operating system you have, right? And this editor we are going to use for our entire project development. That means TypeScript projects, Angular projects. We are going to learn entire TypeScript and everything here. So this is Visual Studio Code. So editor, you can, it's free, it's open. So it will run on every operating system. So you can download this for your Windows. So once you download that, so you will find the Visual Studio Code in your programs. And this is the Visual Studio Code here. This is the Visual Studio Code. This is the Visual Studio Code Editor, right? And this is technically the Visual Studio Code Editor and how it looks like. How to use it, I will tell you. How to create a project, how do we work with the project, and we will see that. Technically, we will see that. So the point is, so once you have downloaded, so what are the things you need to get? A fast overview I will give you. You need to download Node.js, then you need to download TypeScript, and you need to download VS Code editor. These three are required. So Node.js, you can download and TypeScript, after Node.js is downloaded, npm install -g TypeScript. Then once TypeScript is installed, now you can, there is no order, but first Node.js is mandatory to install TypeScript. First install Node.js, then you can install TypeScript. Then you get this editor. And you can use any kind of editor, but I don't care. We will not care. We will not learn. So I will use only Visual Studio Code. Okay, if you have to follow our class, you have to download and install Visual Studio Code editor only. And entire our Angular and TypeScript sessions will happen on that. So we will not entertain any other editors here for Angular and TypeScript, strictly only Visual Studio Code editor. So don't ask again and again, can I use that? Can I use that? Already you can use it. So different types of editors, but we will strictly stick to this one. So once it is ready, now we have to learn how to create the TypeScript project, how to create a project, how to write the TypeScript programs, and how do we compile and run these programs and work with them. So that means we have to start practically working with TypeScript programs. That we will see in our next session. Okay, so tomorrow we will continue with that. In tomorrow's session, we are going to start our practical approach towards TypeScript. Writing the TypeScript programs, compiling and working with them step by step, we will discuss in tomorrow's session. So meanwhile, for the classroom related notes, you can temporarily get it from the GitHub link. This is the GitHub link, right? So once it is done, then tomorrow we will start working with the TypeScript. So how to create the projects, configure them and work with them. Okay, right.